Hello everyone, good to see so many students in today's live IELTS class. My name is Adrian and I'm broadcasting to you from Budapest, capital city of Hungary here in Central Europe. Welcome everyone. Today we are on course session 19, focusing on IELTS speaking section, the fourth and final section of our IELTS course sessions. Hi, Sarah. Hi, Millions Production. Hi, Mihak. Good to see you in class, Jeffrey. Thanks for becoming a member, Gary Brar. Please do send me an email and make sure I can hook you up with those practice exams. And you can also make some requests for classes. Hi, Rahul. Good to see you in class as well. Manish. Hello, everyone, again. All right, as usual, just a quick preamble. Materials are coming from our websites. If you're studying for academic IELTS, please visit us at aehelp.com. If you're studying for general IELTS, please visit us at gieltshelp.com. We like to separate out academic from general IELTS, as these two exams are 50% different from each other. The reading section specifically and task 1 in the writing section as well are quite different. And of course, the goal of students who are doing academic versus general are different. So if you're studying general, go to this site. Academic, go to this site. If you have Android, download our app from your Play Store. Academic IELTS Help, and if you have iOS, you should be able to download the app from your iTunes store now. Just look for Academic IELTS Help and our logo. On our websites, you can find our 6 exam books, fully interactive course for your tablet, phone, as well as over 100 hours of video lessons for all sections of IELTS. So definitely go there, use that. There's a free version of this site. You can try it out without cost. A lot of students already know this. If you have questions, comments, you would like me to have a peek at your homework, give you a band estimate for your writing, you can always contact me in my email, adrian@aehelp.com. That's my name, at aehelp.com. On the websites, you'll also find detailed corrections and editing service for your writing as well. All right, let's have a quick peek at the schedule coming up. Today, course part 19, as I just mentioned. Then on the 21st and 22nd, we'll wrap up the course sessions and the speaking with some solid practice and some specific strategies for part 1, part 2, part 3 of the IELTS. And then on the 23rd, we'll do a members chat only for our special members that are supporting us. Members, you can definitely send us requests for these classes. I already have a couple for this one, but definitely send those requests and I'll schedule them for future members chat only classes. All right, so yesterday I introduced the speaking section. I talked about some really important points that you need to think about and practice at home. And now we will continue with some more specific question strategies, and we'll apply these strategies to some questions. So let's have a peek at what it means to master verbal communication. And it's very, very important for all of you to know that IELTS is not just a simple test of English. I can prove this to you very easily. If IELTS were just a simple test of English, all that you would need is one version of the exam, and it would have a different scoring system. But that's not the case. There's 2 versions of the exam, academic and general. Both versions do test your critical thinking, your ability to visualize and to effectively communicate, just as well as your actual English skills, your vocabulary and your grammar. So if you're looking to get a nice high band score, 6.5, 7.5, or maybe reaching for the stars, getting that perfect band 9, you will definitely need to master not just the English language, so not just vocabulary, grammar, but also your communication skills have to be top-notch, okay? So, and you can do it, okay? So I'm not saying that to scare you or freak you out. You all have really good brains. They're super computers. They work on some form of quantum physics, psychology, so they have the capacity to master a language, master communication. You're born with that ability, okay? So believe in yourself, do the necessary practice, learn the right strategies, and you will enhance both your communication and English. So let's get to a couple of important points, getting into some more detailed strategies for the speaking section, things to consider. Okay, so this is General Strategies 1 right now. First things first, and I think this is probably an expression or a saying, not just in English, but in maybe all cultures around the world. Think before you speak, okay? You've probably heard your parents say that, your teachers say that, and you might have heard it elsewhere as well. Think before you speak. That is very, very important. Of course, it's an important skill in life, and it is absolutely necessary for good scores on IELTS. So you can't just quickly blurb out maybe the first thing that comes to mind when the IELTS examiner is asking you a question. Kamal Preet, we will have a peek at task 2 or part 2 cue card question as well today. So you need to learn to buy time. And you will notice when paying attention that a lot of intelligent speakers, educated individuals with master's degrees, doctorate degrees, lawyers, doctors, politicians, they definitely focus and pay attention to thinking before they speak and learning to buy time before answering questions, especially if they're sensitive questions or difficult questions or questions that don't necessarily have an absolute truth or an objective truth but are subjective, then intelligent speakers will buy time. Now, the most simple way, or the simplest way, to buy time on IELTS is simply just ask for it, okay? It's absolutely okay to do that. You will not lose marks for that, especially if your response is better grammatically, word choice, but also better information, better connected ideas, then your mark will go up, all right? So there are some good phrases that you should learn before you sit the IELTS so that you can use them. And it's absolutely okay to use these at least a few times. It's tough to say exactly when. You will feel it or you will recognize it when that question comes up. Okay. Now again, ladies and gentlemen, this is a speaking class, and although you are typing into the chat, I'm sure that at home you have a nice loud voice, so make sure that you repeat these expressions after me. Again, they're very useful for you. So if you're asked a difficult question, you can say something like, "That's an interesting question. Let me think about that for a second." Okay? So if the examiner asks you a question and you don't really know, you understand the question clearly, or you're starting to understand it, but you don't really know what to say. Nobody's really asked you that before. You've never given that any thought. It's okay to ask for time. I would do the same in a natural conversation. So I would say, "Well, I never really thought about that. Just give me a moment." So repeat after me. "That's an interesting question. Let me think about that for a second." And then the examiner knows that you are thinking for a few seconds and about to give a response. All right? Here's another way to ask it. "That's an unusual question. Can you give me a moment?" Okay? Or what I just mentioned, repeat after me. "I've never thought about that. Please give me a second." Okay? Here's an important point to remember when you go into the IELTS interview and you sit down face to face with that examiner. The examiner has no knowledge of your English skills, okay? So they're meeting you for the first time. They don't know if you're a fluent English speaker or your English is comprised of "good morning, hello, how are you, my name is Adrian, I go to school," okay? They don't know if you're at the top or if you're more in the beginner phases of learning English. So if you are pausing when you speak, and they don't know what kind of speaker you are, they don't know if you're shy, if you're confident, they don't know if you like to speak quickly or slowly. So you have to be cautious, okay? You have to be preemptive. And what I mean by that is the IELTS examiner in your speaking interview has about 12 to 15 minutes, as I said last class, for the whole interview, okay? And many times students report that they feel like the interviewer is rushing them. So they're just going from one question to the next question to the next question to the next question. They're just rushing through the questions. They go really quickly through part 2. Some students complain that the examiner didn't give them the whole 2 minutes to speak. So again, the examiner, they're well trained, but they don't know much about you. Okay, so it's up to you to, first of all, just be calm. Don't stress. You're there to do a job, okay? To the examiner, you're just a number. You're not a name. You're just basically a number on their sheet. You do have an IELTS candidate number. So if you're pausing, so if you take a moment to think about your answer and you're not asking for time, so the examiner asks you a question like, what do you think the advantages and disadvantages of frequent advertising are for people's daily lives? Okay, if you pause and you're just kind of blank staring the examiner's first thought is the student has no idea what I just asked them. Okay, if the examiner thinks that you don't have an idea of what they're asking you, then they're going to go to that next question. They're just going to go, okay, and then they'll say the next question. They won't even say, okay, they'll just say the next question. How do you think governments could regulate advertising to improve society? And your brain is still thinking about what are the advantages and disadvantages of advertising for people in daily life. So now you're really falling behind, okay? This is not good. You don't want that situation to happen. So it's your responsibility to slow down the examiner or to let them know that you're thinking about an answer or that you're completing an answer, okay? So you need to do that. So if the examiner asks you, what are the advantages and disadvantages of frequent advertising on people's daily lives? Then you need to say, that's an interesting question. Just give me a moment to think, please. And at this point, the examiner thinks, okay, the student seems to have understood what I just asked them. They just need a moment to actually come up with that information and put it together in English, okay? So you need to create that situation. Don't expect the examiner to create that situation. They're interviewing 20, 30 students that same day, so they're not going to be preemptive. You need to be preemptive with that. So for that, you need to use these questions, okay? Let's have a look at an example part 3 question, and let's just do that right now, just to emphasize this point, okay? So here is a part 3 sample, a few questions, and then here's the first one. So just imagine you've finished part 1, you've finished part 2, you're feeling pretty good. Now you're on to part 3, and part 3, of course, is a little bit more difficult. The questions are more specific. They're connected to part 2. So the examiner says, what attributes should a good role model have? Okay, the examiner will say, let's continue with part 3. Let's talk a little bit more about role models. Again, repeat after me, everyone. What attributes should a good role model have? Okay, try to answer this question. Use a strategy, so use an expression to buy yourself some time. Think about the answer and give me a good response. I'll wait for your responses. I'll write up my own meanwhile, and then I'll give you feedback on how you would do. Now, when you're typing your responses into the chat, don't be shy. Also say them verbally, loud, so you can hear yourself. Practice, okay? And everybody who's watching, there's quite a few of you, don't be shy to read the responses of students in the chat and say them out loud, okay? If you see no new vocabulary, write that down, all right? So here could be a good response, an example. This is just one of many, and I'm waiting for yours while I write down mine. That's an interesting, or you can even say that's an important question. There's a lot of ways to do this. Please give me a moment to think. And then don't space out, actually think about it. So here, when you ask for that time, visualize, try to imagine or try to think about role models, so people who are respected in society, who others look up to. If you're a big sports fan, these days Ronaldo seems to be the man of the hour for football stars. He's a role model to a lot of young children. Why is he a role model? He's successful, he's hardworking, he's a very positive person. So if you visualize Ronaldo, remember you can think about small to big as well, right? Think about the example. Then you can come up with a good answer in those few seconds to think about your answers, okay? So a lot of students ask me, well, if I say this, how much time can I think about the question? Okay, it's okay to have a 3, 4, 5-second pause and just think, okay? 3 seconds is 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000. Okay, so it's lots of time, lots of connections, information can fly around in the brain in that amount of time. Okay, so I see some answers coming up there. Naveen says, as far as I could tell you, a good role model must possess kindness and social responsibility. Good, Naveen, and then give me an example, and then you're reaching for those nice high band scores, okay? So, that's an important question. Please give me a moment to think. Well, I definitely believe that good role models must be hardworking and positive. A good example is Ronaldo, the famous football star, who not only practices the sport 10 hours a day, but also wears a smile every time he is on camera. Okay? And I think a lot of you will agree with me. If you've seen Ronaldo these days, he's often in the media. He always seems to be just smiling, grinning, really happy about life and everything that's going on. And of course, many of you know that he practices a lot. If you're not a big football fan or a sports fan, just think of somebody else, okay? Think of a famous author, writer, film star. So there are lots of different role models that you can think of. Now, this is a Band 9 level answer. You're buying time, you're giving a solid answer, you're using a nice complex compound sentence with a relative pronoun. It's got not only but also in here, which is a good correlative conjunction. We'll talk more about those, okay? I'll read some of the student responses here. Jubilant James says, well, that's an interesting question. A role model is someone whom people look up to and pay keen interest in their lives and are much respected. A good role model should be covering not only one area of social responsibility, but also leading by example, something like that. Jubilant James, I think you're kind of getting lost in the first bit of your answer there. It's better to more directly attack the question and talk about the response or the attitudes, personality of a good role model, okay? So be a little bit more direct, Jubilant James. Jeffrey says, I think a person that people look up to is a good role model. He or she should care about the environment, like famous actor Leonardo DiCaprio, who not only donates his time, but also millions of dollars to preserve endangered species. That ending, Jeffrey, would push your score to a Band 9, okay? Otherwise, it's closer to a Band 7, 5, 8, okay? All right. Naveen is adding a little bit here, I can see. Let me explain further. Instead of saying clearly, Naveen, just say, let me explain further. Ms. Dohney has been my role model, who is calm, compassionate, and equally responsible towards society. I revere her the most. If it's a miss, It's going to be a her. Careful with that, Naveen. And Naveen, give us a specific example. What does she do? Okay, so include that. So buying time is definitely an important skill. It's a skill that's very useful for part 3, but you might want to use it even in part 1. Okay, it can be useful there as well. Another way to buy time is by using natural fillers. All right, so using natural fillers. Natural fillers are sounds, usually single syllable sounds that are drawn out like or well or or and there's a huge misconception or misunderstanding about these natural fillers for a lot of students. I know that a lot of students hear from certain IELTS programs and courses that natural fillers are not good to use in the speaking interview. Certainly, if you overuse them, so every second word you're going, well, a good role model is someone who is compassionate and honest. For example, yeah, okay, definitely. That's not good. That's going to hurt your score if you're doing that, all right? That's breaking your fluency, and that's not going to work for you, all right? So you want to avoid overusing natural fillers. That aside, using natural fillers is something that a lot of us do in our own language, and it's a part of our diction, our style of speech. So it's quite awkward to suddenly drop natural fillers altogether when we're speaking another language, and it's not necessary, okay? You can absolutely use them, just don't overuse them. If you're using them infrequently, once, maybe twice in a response, then that also works to buy time. In fact, when you do it in your own language, you're naturally doing it to buy time to compose your ideas in your sentences, okay? It's a absolutely common, natural part of human psychology and communication, okay? So keep that in mind. So natural fillers can buy you valuable time. If you do them in your own language, then definitely don't try to force yourself not to do them when you're speaking English. They will not hurt your score as long as you're using them naturally. That also means that natural fillers are different in different languages, okay? Some languages share similar natural fillers. Some are quite different. I speak a bit of Japanese, and I know that in the Japanese language, people often will say no, to, so, and these are their natural fillers, okay? Now, if your natural fillers in your language are different than in English, then you need to switch and use English ones. It's really weird if you're using another language natural filler in English, okay? So I've heard Japanese students do that before where they go, no, and I went to the store. And you're kind of going, what was that first thing you just said? Because it's not natural in English. So you need to make sure that you're using ones that are English natural fillers, okay? Have those become smooth and common in your speech if you're using them, okay? All right, so here we have an example of this at the bottom. The examiner says, what attributes should a good role model have? Student says, that's an interesting question. Can you give me a moment? And then the examiner might say certainly, or they might just wait. And then the student buys a little bit more time with, I believe. And then they continue to speak. So let's keep going here. See what else we can do. Okay. Now, before I start going through this information here, a little bit more to the previous. These aren't in these slides. A lot of students ask me, what should I do if I don't understand a question? And I talked a little bit about this last class, okay? So if you don't understand a question, what should you do? Okay, this is a little bit of additional information that's not in our slides here. What should you do? Let's see how many of you remember this from last class. So what should you do if you do not understand a question? It's a very good question. What should you do? Begside says, try to paraphrase it. So try to paraphrase that question. Absolutely. So try to figure out what the question is and from context. So try to infer, use an educated guess, and then try to paraphrase it. Miriam says, ask for the question to be repeated. Okay. So absolutely, Miriam. So one that you can do is ask for the question to be repeated. Okay, it's communication. If you're talking to someone, someone asks you for directions, you didn't quite catch what they said, what will you do? You'll ask them, hey, sorry, I didn't quite catch what you just said. Can you ask me that again, please? So ask for the question to be repeated, and you can say something like, I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand you. Can you please ask me that question again? Okay, so again, repeat after me. I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand you. Can you please ask me that question again? And then, in most cases, the IELTS examiner will repeat the exact same question. The IELTS examiners are told not to paraphrase, because if they're paraphrasing, they're giving you more information, they're giving you more help. They are not an English teacher, they're an examiner, so they won't paraphrase for you, but they will repeat the question, okay? So you can say, I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand you. Can you please ask me the question again? And then if you kind of understand, if you think you understand, then paraphrase to check. Okay, so let's have a look here at one of these examples. Let's take this one here. Have you been a role model to anyone? Okay, have you been a role model to anyone? Try to paraphrase that, okay? So here I might say, if the examiner asks me, again, remember, repeat these, have you been a role model to anyone? I'll say, I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch what you're asking me. Can you please repeat the question? The examiner will say, sure. Have you been a role model to anyone? And then I can say something like, so, just to be clear, you are asking me if another person, I'll get you back on camera here, just give me a second. Think about your paraphrase meanwhile. Okay. So just to be clear, you're asking me if another person has looked up to me or followed my example. Okay, using your own words to the best of your ability, paraphrase what you think the question is asking you. So just to be clear, you're asking me if another person has looked up to me or followed my example. And if you got it right, so if you paraphrase the question right, you will probably see the expression of the examiner's face, and just by looking at their face, you'll get that nonverbal communication that, aha, I think I got it. And if you didn't get it right, so if you said something completely weird and strange and very nonsensical to what you were asked, then you will most likely see that expression on the examiner's face, because it's very hard to hide that, where we look at the person and we're like, what did you just say? So you can kind of catch that. And examiners are not cruel, and I have heard students say that when they paraphrase the question and they got it right, the examiner does say, yes, that's what I was asking you. Okay, so they're trained kind of not to really help you, but if you do something like that, you get it right, you might get a nod, or you might get a yes, or that's it, or they might repeat the question to affirm that you've gotten it right, okay? So you can paraphrase the question to try to see if you understand it. Okay, what should you do if you're completely off the mark? So You asked for the question to be repeated. The question was repeated. The examiner asked you again. You tried to paraphrase it. You blundered. It wasn't accurate. You're off topic. You're looking at the examiner. You can see they're kind of giving you this weird eye of, what did you just say? What should you do? What do you do now? So you're realizing that, uh-oh, I don't understand this question. And I'm starting to get a little bit frustrated and confused and upset and stressed. What should you do? What do you do now? Farah says, move to another question. Right, don't waste time, okay? And I said this in the last class as well, is request for the next question, okay? Often the examiner can pick up on that and they'll go to the next question before you even ask. But if that's not happening, then again, be preemptive, okay? So ask to move to the next question, okay? So say something like, my apologies. I'm not exactly sure what you are asking. Can we please move to the next question? Okay. Now, clearly, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not telling you to do this every question that the examiner asks. That would obviously be very strange, and you probably wouldn't get a very good mark at all. This is specifically targeting difficult questions or questions that you're not sure of, okay? Don't waste time. You do have a time limit. The examiner has a time limit for the interview, so don't waste time on questions that you have no idea of. That you will give some kind of very strange answer for, which drop your mark. So just say, my apologies. Again, repeat, repeat, repeat. This is for you, not so much for me. Repeat, my apologies. I'm not exactly sure what you are asking. Can we please move to the next question? And then I'm sure the examiner will just nod and go to the next question, okay? So that's your strategy when you get stuck, all right? So learn to buy time and know what to do for difficult questions when you're stuck, all right? Another side note here, a lot of students, they'll say, well, there are a couple of reasons for that. Please don't start your responses that way, especially if you don't know the couple of reasons. A lot of students get stuck when they do that, okay? So, all right, let's have a look at the second set of strategies here for the speaking section. Begzod, are you asking me if you can still get 7 if you're using these strategies? Absolutely, as long as you're giving some good answers for the other questions, okay? I'm not sure if that's what you're asking, but that is a good point to make, that with these strategies, you can get a better mark, or you can still get a 7 or more, as long as you're doing well for most of that speaking interview, okay? Definitely do better than if you start giving all kinds of strange answers and get stuck, and the examiner's just going from question to question. All right, so here's another really important one. I see a lot of students make mistakes on this point. Don't think that the examiner knows what you know. I realize that the font here is a little bit smaller. Can everybody read this okay? Just give me a confirmation of yes, I can read that, I can see it. If not, I can make it bigger a little bit. Maybe I'll do that anyway. Okay, there we go. A little bit bigger. All right. Looks like most of you can read it anyhow, so that's good. All right, I've made it a little bit bigger. So, of course, some of you are looking at this on your computer, others on tablets, some of you are on small phones, so screen size does matter. So, this point here, don't think that the listener knows what you know. This is a very common shortcoming in many people's communication, is when they're talking to other people, they speak to them as if that person has the same information in their head, not only the same information, but has shared experiences or very similar perspectives about topics and subjects. And although with your close friends, that's somewhat true, with your parents, it's a little bit less true. They're a different generation. With your grandparents, it's even less true. With People from other countries, it's even less true because their perspectives are very different. So don't assume that your listener knows what you know, okay? Don't think that they know what country you come from. Don't think that they know what village you live in. Don't think that they know how many brothers you have. Don't think that they know what kind of applications you use on your phone or tablet. Don't think they know what Facebook is, okay? You might sit in a speaking interview with a 60-year-old examiner who has maybe heard the word Facebook once or twice, but has no idea of what it is, doesn't much like computers, and they're asking you some questions about communication, and you start telling them that, oh yeah, I use Facebook all the time to connect with my friends and find out what's going on and meet up with them. And this person's probably just looking at you bright-eyed going, what are you talking about? So you need to be clear. You need to say, I use an application called Facebook on my phone. This application allows for text, video, audio communication, and there's an address book and connection to all of my friends and family there, so it's easy to communicate with them anywhere, anytime, and organize plans and programs, parties, okay? For example, last week I wrote a post on this website which announced my upcoming birthday party, so all of my friends attended, all right? So that's a clear way to communicate that. So don't think that your listener knows what you know. Be specific. Don't say, in my country, the most popular game is cricket. Say, in India, the most popular game is cricket, at least for the last few hundred years. There are cricket leagues in every small town to major city. It's a televised event and followed by tens of millions of people everywhere, okay? So be very specific. Use the name of your country. The more specific your nouns are, the more lexical resource you're showing, which means vocabulary you're showing for your examiner, and the better mark you will get. So again, remember, your listener is an alien. They're different from you, but they're smart. They will analyze what you say. If it doesn't make sense, your mark's not going to be as good, okay? So be specific. The other big one is don't go off topic, all right? A lot of students tend to go off topic. They tend to talk, like I do sometimes, but they don't stay on topic. They go off topic. So the question is, what attributes or what qualities should a good role model have? And the next thing you know, the student is talking about their favorite teacher and how they met them and what a great teacher they are because of all of the fantastic information that they've educated them with over the years, and they're talking about suddenly the teacher's dog that is so cute and fuzzy and it likes to chase its tail, and the examiner's just going, what attributes should a good role model have? So don't go off topic. Stay on topic. What that means is answer the question, give a clear, accurate explanation, give a solid example that's clearly connected to that explanation, and then wait for the next question, okay? That's all you need to do. Sometimes students learn from, I'm not sure where, but some students learn just to keep talking until the examiner stops them. No, don't do that, okay? Especially in part 1 and part 3. Don't just keep talking until the examiner stops you. Instead, answer the question, give an explanation, give an example, and stop, okay? Here's an example, okay? So just repeat after me. What is the most popular sport in your country, and why do people like this sport? And the student responds with, in Russia, I think football is the most popular, although ice hockey is very popular as well. Both sports are very fast-moving with lots of excitement, which makes them appealing to many Russians. Not to mention, this year, the World Cup FIFA, which is the largest football sporting event, was held in Russia, adding that nice example to it. Notice how the student doesn't say in my country, the student actually says in Russia, okay? They give a good explanation. They say it's fast moving with lots of excitement. That's why it's popular. And then adding in that example of the World Cup FIFA right now works really well. Will get you that high mark, okay? So make sure to focus on that. Okay, so before we get to some practice here, some more points to keep in mind, okay? Pay close attention to the grammar of the question. To get high bands in IELTS, you need to reflect the grammar of the question. The people who write the questions for the speaking for IELTS, they have a very structured system of choosing the right questions to ask from students to measure their speaking skills, okay? So when that IELTS test maker is sitting down to create the speaking questions, they're thinking, okay, I should include one question that tests for adverbs of frequency, like usually, always, sometimes, never. I should include a question that tests for present perfect, like have you ever done this? Have you ever been here? Okay. They'll include a conditional. They'll say, okay, I have to include one question that tests the student's ability for conditional grammar. If you had $1 million, what would you buy? Okay, so conditional question. So they're looking to elicit, to pull those different grammar forms from the student. They're waiting for you to show that you know that grammar. So it's really important to use the grammar of the question in your answer, okay? Now, the second point here, B, is using conjunctions, coordinating, and, but, yet, nor, correlative, and subordinating. I'm not going to go into too much detail there because that's a full class on its own easily. Here are these adverbs of frequency. That's just kind of feeding into the grammar. Always, never, usually, rarely. And using adjective clauses, okay? So using those relative pronouns, relative adjectives, all right? That's very important as well. So let's have a look at some of these questions now and practice some of these skills that I rambled off for you in the last 40 minutes. Lots of information there for you to include in your answers. So let's see how well you can apply this to the questions. Let's start with this one. Why are role models important? Again, repeat after me. Why are role models important? Try to give me an answer for that one and include some of the strategies that I've mentioned. Okay, so why are role models important? Again, visualize, use your critical thinking. Think about, okay, what is a role model? Why are they important? Can I think of somebody that's a role model? Shabib says, every nation has many role models. Shabib, I did not ask you if nations have role models. I'm asking you, why are they important? So what is the reason for having role models in people's lives? Shabin, if you didn't understand that question, you should say, can you repeat that? Or, so what you're asking me is, and then try to paraphrase what this question is asking. I'm not poking at you. I think it's great that you tried to tackle the question. You're just giving me an answer that is for a different question. So you'd get a low mark. That would only get you like a 4.5 on the IELTS, or a 5 at most. I acknowledge that you're speaking English, but I can't recognize that you're answering my question. Okay? That's the big difference. Love Shahota says, because we learn lots of things from them. Love Shahota, that would probably get you a 5. I'll tell you why. One, you didn't use the question. You should always use the question. I believe role models are important because we can learn lots of things from them. Number two, the word things is really bad. Don't use the word things. It doesn't have value in communication, verbal or written. Things can be anything. In university, professors love to circle that word and go, what thing? So you could say, well, I believe role models are important because we can learn lots of valuable knowledge from them. Always find nouns that are better than the word thing. Don't use the word thing or stuff in your speaking, okay? Jubilant James says, well, that's an unusual question. Can I take a moment to think? Sure you can, Jubilant James. Think about it. Millions Production says, role models are paramount for every individual because they motivate personal achievement and specific aims in life. Give me an example, Millions Production. Give me an example of how a role model has given value to your life, okay? Visualize it. Come up with it. And you can even ask Millions Production, you can even ask for time after your first sentence. So you can say, if you give me just a moment, I'll think about an example to support my answer. You can even do that, okay? So if you just give me a moment, I'll think of an example to support my answer. Well, I remember when I was in high school, there was a gym teacher who was a great basketball player, and he really motivated me to pursue sports, and I play basketball to this day, which keeps me fit, healthy, and happy, okay? Begzod says, I think that role models motivate us to follow their path and achieve success. For example, my brother was an essential role model in my life because he helped me with math when I struggled. Begzod, very good. That will get you a nice high mark, absolutely. Priya Shabet says, I think icons and role models are essential in our life because they exhort people to support a cause or draw young people's attention to social issues such as the environment. I think such as celebrities is awkward there because the social issue that the attention is being drawn to needs to finish that sentence, okay? So careful with that, all right? Good paraphrasing there, by the way, for a couple of you. Farah M642 or Farah Al-Badri. That's some nice paraphrasing there. It is crucial to have role models because they motivate others. For instance, don't be shy, Farah. Finish it up instead of the ... Roshni, I'm reading as many as I can that fly by in the chat. There are a lot of people chatting. If I missed yours, you can write it in there again, and I'll try to catch it. If I don't get this question, I'll get the next one. So don't worry, just keep at it. All right, one more. After Kumar says, well, I think role models are important because people get hope from seeing their success and believe that they too can achieve greatness in life. For instance, ever since I was a child, I've wanted to become a doctor because of a famous physician in my country who has been a role model for me. Okay, so nice added example thereafter. That was good. All right, let's move to the next one. Again, repeat after me. Have you been a role model to anyone? Okay, let's buy a little bit of time. Let's paraphrase. You can buy time with paraphrasing as well as asking for it. So just to be clear, you're asking me if another person has looked up to me or followed my example. By the way, buying time and making sure you understand the question by using a paraphrase also not only gives you time to think, but guides your thinking, and often your brain will come up with an idea of, aha, oh yeah, I remember when that guy was helping me out, or I remember when that woman gave me that really good suggestion. So paraphrasing is very, very powerful in communication. So just to be clear, you're asking me if another person has looked up to me or followed my example. So have you been a role model to anyone? Finish this answer for me, ladies and gentlemen. So finish this one up with a nice response, explanation, and example. Okay? So Shabin, good. That's an interesting question. Can you please give me a moment to think? Don't repeat that second please. Just one please, Shabin. But it's good. Yes, think. Okay? Or the examiner will just look at you and wait. Victoria, a little bit awkward. You need to rephrase that to make it clear. Okay, Victoria Boss? I kind of have an idea of where you're going with it, but there's definitely some grammatical and word use mistakes there that make it tricky to understand. All right? Pay attention to the grammar of this question when you're giving your response. Hint, hint. So Kevin Gallagher says, I have been looked up to by my little sister. She tried to emulate me when she was a kid. For instance, she played the games I played, or she shared my hobbies. Kevin, that's good. I think the passive voice is a little bit awkward in the beginning. I would use the active voice. My little sister has looked up to me in the past. She emulated or copied a lot of the games I played, as well as my hobbies. And then give a specific example. For instance, when I was in my teens, I used to play billiards, and my sister copied what I did, and these days she's so good at it that I always lose when we play a game together. Okay, so think about that specific example. Anoop says, personally speaking, not talking, Anoop, personally speaking, I don't remember being a huge impact in anyone's life. Anoop, sorry, I missed the rest of that because it flew by, but it looked quite good. Just a couple of word use mistakes there, okay? Mumtaji says, yes, I have been a role model at least once with my younger brother because I was the one who inspired him and guided him to pursue his studies in energy engineering, electrical engineering, which is the same as my field, okay? So, Mumtaji, nice grammar. Word choice is a little bit off, but otherwise, quite a good answer, all right? Good job. Pavneet Kaur says, yes, many times my cousins have followed me in my footsteps. Like being sincere, having a sense of discipline, and being punctual. So I can certainly say that I have been a role model to them. Pavneet, it's a good answer. Just add on that extra bit at the end, so I can certainly say I've been a role model to them. So you make it really clear for the examiner that you're tackling the exact question with the present perfect grammar of the question, okay? Really important. All right. Jubilant James says, I am always looked up to by my colleagues in my department because of my empathetic attitude towards patients and maintaining a positive attitude in any emergency situation. Very close to perfect, James. I think a specific example there would help you out a little bit. So, for instance, last week, a man came into the hospital with a stroke. The situation looked dire, but I kept a positive attitude and he turned out okay. All right. One more, Paria Sabet. I have never been anyone's role model till now, but I hope I can succeed in my path and people will look up to me in the future. These days, I'm studying to be a mathematician, and I'm working on some great equations that I hope to inspire others. Okay, so a little bit of an example there, Priya, and again, you're doing really well. Okay, Millions Production, very good question. So Millions Production says, should I give an example for every question in part 3? Not necessarily. Great question, Millions Production. Great question. Not necessarily, but I would say at least to every second question. And I'm always encouraging that when you're practicing this at home, then try to give examples for every question or as many questions as you can. Some questions are a little bit tricky to give examples for, but when you're practicing, yes, at home before getting ready for the IELTS exam, try to give as many examples as possible so that when you're in the official test, then you can come up with good examples for at least every second question, okay? That was a very good one. Good inquiry there, Millions Production, and I hope my answer made sense, okay? For us, saying the examiner asked me for an example. All right. Yeah, that's kind of a hint, Farah, that something's not going right when the examiner says, well, can you give me an example? And sometimes they do ask. It's on their actual question sheet. It says, can you give me an example? So they will ask you for it, okay? All right, here's the next one. Let's tackle this one. What responsibilities does a role model have? Okay. What responsibilities, thanks for that feedback, Millions Production, I appreciate you. This one, ladies and gentlemen, again, repeat after me. Don't forget, we're not just writing here, we're speaking. Dunuin, they should not be asked, well, it's okay if they ask you why, but you should be including that in your answer. Humans, again, I said this last class, we're curious by nature. The most important question in our lives most of the time is why? Why is that happening? Why did you do that? Why does it work that way? So you should always include that into your response. The why answer, the explanation should always be there, okay? Again, practicing at home, answer, explain, example, okay? What responsibilities does a role model have? Notice it's present tense, okay? It's generalized. Here, this have is a possession, so it means what responsibilities does a role model possess, okay? So again, think about a good answer for this question. Tech General says, to give an example, I need to lie almost all the time. So you're stating that. That's fine. That's why it's important to practice it at home. You're not really lying. Don't think about it as a lie. You're just making up information. So you're not doing anything bad. You're not hurting the feelings of anyone or the examiner. You're just proving your English ability. So absolutely, if you need to make up the example, then just make it up, okay? All right. So, Anoop says role models can have several duties. Every brand endorsed, every feedback given by them are easily trusted. So they must be very cautious not to mislead others. Okay, Anoop, that's good. Sure, that's good. And if you can give me an example, and again, it doesn't have to be real. It can be made up, okay? Mandeep Kaur says, various responsibilities have a role model. The order of words there, Mandeep, you need to change it. Role models have various responsibilities because many people look up to them. And they can cause damage and hurt people if they're not cautious. Okay? Sure, that's good. Again, don't forget, don't just explain why they need to have responsibilities, but explain what are those responsibilities. Okay? Marius Polly says, in my opinion, being a role model is quite demanding activity because you always have to achieve all goals you have and to be a good part of society. Marius Polly, there's something critically wrong in your response. Do you know what it is? Does anybody else know what it is? And I mentioned this in yesterday's class, to be very careful not to do this. So this last comment, or this last post that I just read, has a couple of problems, but one especially. Anybody catch what it is? It's not off topic. Look at from because. So in my opinion, being a role model, something because. So what was in that last response that I said yesterday you have to be very careful about? And again, Marius Polly, I'm not poking at you. I'm just using your example as a good point to emphasize to students. Deepa Mishra says, you, the word you, absolutely. Don't use the word you in your response. We're not talking about me. I'm the examiner. We're talking about role models in general, so don't use the word you in your answer. In this one, it's especially awkward, okay? So say the same thing without the word you. Good for you, Deepa, for catching that, okay? The Free Talker says, I think a role model has a lot of responsibilities because they are followed by people. They need to be careful of their general attitude. They need to make sure that they do not say or do certain activities or behaviors that young children might follow that can hurt them. For example, if Ronaldo was seen smoking a cigarette, that could have a really negative impact on millions of children worldwide, as he is a famous athlete, or drinking alcohol, for example. So that would be a good response. Okay. So, girls and guys, that is all the time we have for today. There were a lot of really great responses and some good interaction there, so good for you. A couple of students whose comments I used to give some feedback and explanation. Please don't feel hurt or insulted if I use your example to point out some mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. I make mistakes. Everybody else watching around the world this video, they all make mistakes too. We need to learn from these mistakes, not be shy about them, not be stressed out about them. Okay, feedback is very important to master communication. I strongly encourage all of you to be critical of your own speaking, your own writing, and each other's when you're learning IELTS, okay? Make sure to practice the skills from these set of slides. Tomorrow we'll continue with more speaking, more examples. Great job, everyone. Thank you for all of those who communicated in the class. Thank you again, members, for joining in today. Much love to all of you. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day. I'll catch you at the same time tomorrow. If it's late in your country, have a nice, good, restful sleep. Wake up energized tomorrow. Bye for now, everyone.